Well, and this was the main piece of evidence that led them down that path, was Archaeopteryx. And however, now as they have studied that more and more, biologists and paleontologists have determined that it's not an intermediate form. It's actually a whole bird. It's a bird of a species that we just don't have around anymore. You know, going back to the whole thing of the species pool isn't getting bigger, it's contracting. Things have been dying out. You know, we don't have dodo birds anymore. We don't have a number of things. They've become extinct. And this bird was, as they look at the bone structure and everything else, they said, okay, it's not an intermediate form, it's a bird. And so, but it was the foundation for this whole thing, which is still extremely popular, you know. And I think that it's probably a common belief that birds came from these raptor, you know, kind of more reptile kind of form. But now that evidence that was the key point of evidence is gone. So there is no intermediate form. And so part of it, they'll make these claims and hold it up. The next missing link is found. You know, this is the thing between, you know, this and this. And it's on the headlines and Scientific American and everywhere else, big article, and then, oh, whoops, they study it a bit more and turns out it's actually just one of these.
Yeah.
And it's not transitional at all. It's a variation of one that there is. And so it's like, okay, but that isn't ever publicized. And so you have a lot of problems with these. And if you go back and look at them, it's like, okay, this is this species, this is this known species. It's not something that is an unknown in between. So, fossil record, Cambrian explosion, not gradual changes, no intermediate forms. Another big problem. False stories are still taught. I mentioned a couple of them. I mentioned that moth one. Okay, so here's problems, some serious problems that evolutionists have. First of all, the fossil record. No evidence. In fact, it totally is opposed to the Darwinian evolutionary theory. So that describes the change from one to the next. The other big problem that they have is the beginning point. There's no evidence from going from a non-living to living. They don't know how that happened. How do you get from the elements, hydrogen, helium, you know, all of the various elements, carbon, to something that is alive, to some simple cell? How do you get there? And so, how do you get there? What do evolutionists believe?
They just randomly fell in the right place at the right time and able to it.
Well, what evidence do they have? Do they have any evidence? Do they have anything that they would say, this is how it happened?
The Big Bang.
Okay, the Big Bang got stuff, but it doesn't say how stuff became living.
Oh, yeah. So they put some gases that they thought were in the prehistoric atmosphere into this chamber, and they like heated it up or shot some kind of electrical bolt through it, like a lightning, to see if the reaction would happen, that would form some simple amino acids.
Yes.
That's not a living thing, but they're kind of building blocks for proteins and stuff. So they found that, okay, we found this way that we could probably synthesize amino acids in this simple gas chamber.
Right.
But they didn't know exactly what the right gases were from prehistoric time on Earth, and they got that part wrong and found out that, oh, okay, we never really had these conditions in Earth's atmosphere in the first place. So this kind of reaction that they demonstrated couldn't have happened a long time ago.
Yeah. So the whole concept of where did life begin? So yeah, for a long time that was known as the Miller experiment, and they put some chemicals together, and of course picked the ones that they knew were things that would form amino acids.
Yeah.
And shot electricity through it, and voila, see, it's the primordial soup. That's that's how it's described. There was this mosh of various molecules that formed, and in this soup of things, and an electrical bolt, you know, happened, had lightning, and formed some amino acids. And then amino acids got together somehow. You know, they don't go from there, which that would be like still really hard. You have to have a lot of amino acids and the right ones, you know, joining together to build a protein. But, you know, but the problem is that even that starting point, they had the wrong gases, and so the actual gases, see if I list, oh, I have them in the wrong order here. They used methane and ammonia. So those are, you know, fairly complex organic molecules. Actually, from, you know, they take the bores into the glaciers and stuff like that in Antarctica and determine what kinds of gases were there, and they take the bores way down into the dirt. And so it looks like actually what was probably around is carbon dioxide and nitrogen. And when you pass an electrical bolt through that, unfortunately, you wind up with formaldehyde and cyanide.
When you do it through carbon dioxide and nitrogen.
Yes. All these ides that aren't exactly helpful for life. So, the Miller experiment and the question of where did life begin, in fact, there's no answer for that. And I was shocked when I was at Berkeley, and you may have heard me mention this before. There was a symposium on origins of life, and they determined that there is no known mechanism by which life could have come to be on Earth. And so, the prevailing current thought is that it came from somewhere else in the universe. Some have actually proposed aliens. And they held that out there as a potential theory. Some other advanced life form brought it to the Earth. It's like, whoa, come on. Talk about zero evidence for that. But, you know, it's held out there. Or maybe it came on an asteroid or something. And of course, the problem with that is impact and burning up and extreme heat and everything else. It's not very likely. In fact, the odds would be greatly against it. But because they have no mechanism that the evidence shows on Earth, there is no evidence on Earth or any known mechanism for life to have begun. And so the assumption is, well, it must have come from outer space. That's a problem. So there's no mechanism for how it became on Earth, and there's no mechanism for that early life forms becoming more complex. Another common one, I'll just throw it out there, Haeckel's embryos. You've probably seen that before. I've got a picture of it here. It's booked in. So it looks something like that. You may, I don't know, it's kind of far away. See those? These are supposedly embryos. Well, they're drawings of embryos, and the thought was at that time that that every embryo goes through all of the stages of evolution as it grows. So a human embryo goes through the stages of fish, salamander, reptile, bird, whale, no, chimpanzee, and human. So that was a belief that was put out there, and that's what Haeckel's embryos was meant to demonstrate. As he's showing here, it's hard to see, but the first one is like one form, and then he shows the embryos of, supposedly the embryos of lots of different, you know, there's like a fish, a salamander, a human, a pig, and supposedly, and then he shows these supposed pictures of a human embryo going through these different phases. I mean, this was, first of all, they noticed that, wow, a couple of these look really close. That one human one looks amazingly like the one of the salamander actual one above. Well, it turns out that he just took the plate that he did and copied it from the salamander down to the human. The human one doesn't look like that at all. And this thing was, and here's a picture here of the actual embryos of what they look like, and they're nothing like what were on his drawings. There is a slight resemblance, but you know, he took great liberties and then copied those down into the human one. This whole belief has been, I mean, evolutionists don't believe that anymore, that embryos go through each phase. That was totally discredited, but this diagram still shows up in textbooks. It's still, I can guarantee you, if I went to Joseph or Micaiah's, if they have a biology textbook, it's in there demonstrating. And in fact, in recent debates over stem cell research and the whole issue of abortion, they'll say, well, after all, a human embryo is the same as a fish or a salamander in those early stages. It's like, what? That's just bad science. That does not happen and is not true. But that argument is put out there. So you may hear it because it comes up still in current day debate and discussion. And it's like, wait a second, that's bad scientists, bad science. Biologists don't believe that. It was disproved as a fake even at about the time when he published it. They found out that he just copied stuff from one to the next. And so, anyhow, it's still paraded out there. So you need to know that there's a lot of bogus stuff that's out there. Okay. How are we at? Oh, we're running out of time. So, evolution. The false stories are still taught. We talked about the peppered moth. They don't sit on tree trunks. Lack of missing links. We talked about the Archaeopteryx. That's actually just a bird. Java man. The Archaeoraptor. This was found in, I believe, in China. The Archaeoraptor. And it was published in National Geographic. They had a picture of the fossil all together. And then as people were looking at it more closely, they said, wait a second. Somebody just glued this dinosaur tail onto this bird. The two don't go together. It doesn't fit. So it was a fake. Science magazine, the Bambiraptor. Again, trying to get another example of those raptors that are birds. So this was an example of a reptile that actually was a bird. It was an intermediate form. Unfortunately, it had the same DNA as a turkey. Well, there's only one thing that has the exact same DNA as a turkey. That's a turkey.